and gentlemen, it's Thursday, which means we have wide receivers coming at you. In today's video, we're going to cover the top 36 receivers. We're going to cover wide receiver 1s, wide receiver 2s, and your flex options. It is a tough week in week 7 with 6 teams on bye, so we're going to try to help you get the best lineups you can possibly create so you can dominate this weekend. If you have any questions, if you have any comments, please drop those down below. If you're new or haven't quite got to it yet, please like and subscribe. I greatly appreciate the support. It allows me to do what I love and keep bringing you the content that you love. And with all of that out of the way, let's get into this week's wide receiver rankings. In at number 1 for us is Davante Adams. He gets the Washington football team. And while he was only targeted 5 times last week, he still caught 4 of them for 89 yards. And he came within inches of racking up about another 20 to 25 and scoring a touchdown. He tried a tightrope walk down the sideline where he narrowly stepped out, even though it was initially called a touchdown on the field. Second ranked player is Tyreek Hill against the Tennessee Titans on the road. And Hill has seen a minimum of 12 targets in his last 3 games as Patrick Mahomes has really leaned on him and tried to continue to keep him involved. That's not going to change against this worst-ranked passing defense in the entire NFL, who gives up 50 points a game to wideouts. The final player in our top 3 is my little Cooper Kupp. He gets the Lions. After the first 6 weeks, Kupp has 2 touchdown games in half of them. He is the guy in this offense, and we are not worried about the defense in Detroit. Expect at least 100 yards here, while a score is also probable. Up next at number 4 is Jamar Chase going on the road to face the Ravens. Now, the rapport that he has shown so far with Joe Burrow is undeniable and cannot be overstated. It is a beautiful thing to watch on the field. They certainly get each other, and the production has followed. Chase is the current wide receiver 5, and he shows no signs of slowing down anytime soon. There is a reason that Penei Sewell is in Detroit. Our last player in the top 5 is DJ Moore going against the Giants. Over the last 2 weeks, the Giants are allowing almost 49 points a game to wideout, so he has a great opportunity to produce. The Panthers need this game in the worst way, and DJ Moore is the best offensive weapon that they have to get it done. There is a potential concern for James Bradbury with a shadow coverage on Moore, but I think the talent is good enough where you still have to set him and forget him. Move on to DeAndre Hopkins against Houston in another revenge game. He's our 6th ranked player this week, and he has caught fire over his last 2 games. He's got 3 touchdowns and 142 yards. Now, his volume has not been great, but his efficiency is all world and enough to keep him in our top 6. Next up at 7 is Deebo Samuel against the Colts. Fresh off of his bye, Deebo is still the wide receiver 6 on the season, and now he gets to face a bottom 10 pass defense against wide receivers, so he should be able to pick up right where he left off. It doesn't matter if Jimmy is back there or Trey Lance, he's going to continue to ball out. Move on to A.J. Brown against Kansas City at number 8, and he had question marks coming into his game last week. Injury? Food poisoning? Top passing defense? Brown clearly wasn't bothered. He piled up 91 yards on 7 receptions, and he looked pretty good through almost the entire game, nearly 100% looking to me. Next up is Scary Terry McLaurin. He goes on the road in Lambeau to play the Packers, and while he has cooled off significantly over the last couple weeks, this is a solid matchup. Logan Thomas, Curtis Samuel are both out still, so there are going to be targets aplenty for him to take advantage of, and Green Bay is likely still without their top 2 cornerbacks. Calvin Ridley is the final player in our top 10, and he gets a salivating matchup against the Miami Dolphins, who allowed 50.5 points per game to wideouts over the last 4 weeks. He's good for probably 100 and a score, and he should be plenty rested after his 2-week absence. This is his breakout performance of the season. You can bank on it. 11 to 13 in our rankings all wear the same jersey, and we're going to run through all 3 Bucs wideouts for you now. Start with Mike Evans, who had just 4 targets and 2 catches last week against Philly, he was shadowed by Darius Slay for the majority of that game, so I think Brady is going to get him involved early and often in this one in a game where the Bucs could throw it 40+ times fairly easily. Next, we have Antonio Brown, and I done told you that he's not a wide receiver 3. He's got 21 targets, 217 yards, and 3 touchdowns in his last 2 games. He looks like a beast, and he is the least volatile of all the Bucs wideouts, at least right now. He seems to be Brady's favorite target that has a bunch of value. Finally, Chris Godwin is here at 13. He has 21 targets in his last 3, good for 168 yards on 15 catches. He hasn't scored, however, in the last 3 weeks, and he hasn't finished higher than top 30 in that time. He's the most risk out of all of them. At 14, we move to Robert Woods. Bobby Trees saw his targets plummet to just 5 last week after receiving 14 in that primetime game. Moving forward, I think it's going to fall somewhere in the middle of that, and he has a touchdown in 2 out of his last 3. At 15, it is Brandon Cooks on the road against Arizona, and we featured him in our buy-sell video that I put out yesterday. Cook has 4 finishes in the top 22 on the year and is seeing almost 10 targets a game. Houston is going to be behind in this one. They're going to be airing it out a ton, so I expect plenty of volume here. I think that also brings boom potential for Cooks in week 7. Move on to DK Metcalf at number 16. He gets the Saints this week, and he'll probably stick around this number for a while. There is concern that he is shadowed by Marshawn Lattimore, the stud corner for the Saints, and there's concern about what the Seahawks looked like in the first half against Pittsburgh. Now, they did pick it up in the second half, but certainly not through the air. I think that Metcalf does not return to that wide receiver 1 territory until Russell Wilson returns. Next up at 17 is Courtland Sutton on the road against Cleveland. He's finished as wide receiver 11 and 9 in back-to-back weeks, and now he gets a bottom 6 matchup as the Cleveland Browns are allowing plenty of points to opposing wideouts. He may hope that Jerry Jeudy takes his time returning, but until then, he is locked into lineups. At 18, it is Devonta Smith against the Raiders, and he busted in a great matchup last week against the Bucs, as the Eagles' offense looked absolutely dreadful until late in that one. He had opportunities, but Jalen Hurts just couldn't seem to find him and struggled to deliver passes accurately. It's not going to get any easier against a top 7 matchup this week. We move on to Marquise Brown against the Bengals, and it seemed that we were right being low on him last week as he fell victim to that poor game script as they absolutely demolished the helpless Chargers. We don't love the matchup. We don't love the fact that Rashad Bateman had 6 targets in his first game with a Ravens jersey on. He should continue to see decent volume, but there's a little bit of risk now. The final player in our top 20 is Jalen Waddle. He goes against the Falcons. Waddle was a buy for me last week, and he obviously heard me and appreciated it greatly as he showed up with his best performance of this season. He had 2 touchdowns, 10 catches, and 70 yards, and now he gets a top 10 matchup. Scrumptious. T. Higgins against Baltimore is next, and he's had a slow start coming back from injuries, and in the last 2 games, he has just 76 yards on 13 targets. It might not get any easier against the Ravens as their defense allows just 30 points a game to wideouts, but he is still seeing decent volume in this high-powered Bengals attack. As we continue, Sterling Shepard against Carolina is next up, and the playmakers in New York are dropping like flies. So almost by default, he's going to see at least 10 targets and potentially more in this one. So far, it hasn't mattered who's been on the field with Shepard. He's been able to produce, and he has 3 finishes in the top 30. While the matchup is not a great one, he's going to have enough volume to see wide receiver 2 production and is here at 22. Next is Tyler Lockett against the Saints, and while this is a really good matchup for him, I'm not really sure that it matters. The roller coaster has not been fun for a while for owners, but you still have to stay on it, right? Lockett has 3 finishes at wide receiver 66 or worse in his last 4 games. That is a killer, but you might as well continue to start him. In this Bipocalypse week, we move to 24, and it's Michael Pittman Jr. He gets the San Francisco 49ers on the road, and everything was fine and dandy for Michael Pittman until T.Y. Hilton showed up and sapped all of his usage. Pittman went for just 3 targets last week, and owners are probably starting to panic a little. Now, T.Y. Hilton is potentially banged up and might have to sit, so Pittman might get closer to those 8 targets that he was seeing prior to Hilton's arrival. Rounding out our top 25 is Jacoby Myers against the Jets. And while Myers has not shown much of an upside so far in this offense with Mac Jones at the helm, he does have a respectable floor. The matchup here is about as tough as it gets, so we bank on that floor. Go back-to-back Bears at 26 and 27, and Darnell Mooney is the better of the 2 options. This should surprise no one. The Bears' passing attack was lethal for their standards, as Mooney actually scored a touchdown. Jokes aside, Mooney has 2 finishes in the top 20 in his last 3 games, and he is Chicago's wide receiver 1. Allen Robinson, on the other hand, posted his 2nd best total of the season, where he racked up 53 yards. Yeah, guess that's right. If Tampa Bay's bottom 5 defense cannot cure what ails Robinson, I'm not really sure what can. Tim Patrick is next against Cleveland, and he got back into the end zone after a 3-week absence, adding 42 yards receiving. He's seen 15 targets in his last 2 games, both top 25 finishes. We move to Corey Davis, who goes on the road to Foxborough, and this is a tough matchup for him, but volume should be there and be enough. He's averaging 8 targets over his last 3 games with 197 yards and a touchdown in that time. Finding himself in the top 30 for the first time this season is Mecole Hardman. He goes on the road to face the Titans, and with this matchup, could we potentially see the breakout game we've been waiting for from Hardman? He does have 13 targets and 138 yards in his last 2 games, and you don't get this type of boom potential in this range very often. Speaking of boom potential, Christian Kirk is here next, and he's one of the many Cardinals wide receivers that could boom on any given Sunday. He has 3 finishes in the top 20, and last week was one of them as he finished with a 5 reception out of 8 target, 75-yard game, and a touchdown stat line. At 32, it's Henry Ruggs against the Eagles, and Ruggs was able to do a lot with a little last week. He racked up 97 yards on just 4 targets and 3 catches, also scoring a touchdown. Now, the Eagles matchup is really tough as they allow under 30 points a game to wide receivers. We move now to Odell Beckham Jr. He gets the Denver Broncos, and I really hope that Beckham's able to prove me wrong, but the shell that's currently going out onto the field has not inspired much confidence. He has 2 finishes in the top 30, but hasn't scored or gone over 80 yards yet. Hunter Third and Renfro is our next player up, and he gets the Eagles this week. Now, he finally broke his streak of 5 straight games with at least 5 catches, but he should be often utilized in this game as an underneath security blanket for Derek Carr versus a tough pass rush and secondary in Philadelphia. At 35, it's Marquez Callaway going on the road against Seattle. He has 2 top 26 finishes in his last 3 games, and we love the matchup against the Seahawks. With Michael Thomas's return still a couple weeks away, he's going to have all of the opportunities he can handle. The question is, can he capitalize? Final player before we get to notable omissions, at 36 is Rondale Moore against Houston. I was all over his bust last week, so that earns him a spot back in our rankings, and after just 4 targets, he probably sees at least 6 and can take any one of those for a big gainer. A couple notable omissions for you guys. We start with Tyler Boyd against Baltimore. He is the wide receiver 3 in this offense with T. Higgins back, and he had just 1 catch last week for 7 yards. AJ Green is the other against Houston. Now, Green has been off and on consistently, and I appreciate that. He'll be back next week. Probably. That's all I got for you guys. Thank you so much for joining me. Please drop any questions or comments down below. I would love to engage with you. If you're new or haven't done it yet, please like and subscribe. This is Relentless Press. I am your host, Abraham Opax. We'll see you next time.